What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/MaliciousCompliance. Alright, this story's called Close All the Deals We Can to Meet Quota. Okay. This happened back in 2010. I had started working for a cemetery funeral home combination a couple of years before this all took place. We had around 10 salespeople on our team and worked for a major corporation. At first, we had an amazing sales manager, Jim. He had actually worked at that location as a sales representative years prior and understood what we dealt with each day. He was extremely supportive and brought a great work culture to the team. Jim encouraged us to help families to the best of our abilities, and sales were simply a byproduct of that process, so everyone involved benefited, including the families we serve. We were so successful that Jim received a promotion in 2010 to a regional market manager position in a different area, leaving us without a sales manager at our location. The rest of the sales team and I speculated that the company would bring in another manager from a smaller location to help continue our success. Instead, they decided to hire from outside the company. The guy they chose to replace Jim with was a sales manager from a major insurance company. We will call him Dick. While Dick had a background in sales management, he knew close to nothing about what it was like in the funeral industry, and he had a style of management completely unlike that of Jim. At first, some of us tried to make him aware of the team culture we had in place, and how things would virtually run themselves if he would simply maintain what Jim had accomplished. Dick became very dismissive and went as far as putting a label on the bottom of his coffee mug that read, "The Boss." Anytime someone would try to speak with him about the mistakes we believed he was making, he would take a sip of his coffee, thus showing the label. It was basically an F you. While this succeeded in shutting down complaints, it also alienated him from the sales team. He would also often brag about his past achievements and fail to acknowledge current success of our team members. It didn't take long before morale started to decline and sales performance began to slow. This was when we found out why Dick changed industries. It became clear that Dick had a drinking problem. He started disappearing around noon and would return a couple hours later smelling of alcohol and appeared red-faced and very relaxed. Dick also hired a new sales rep to join the team. She was far different from the rest of us. She was young, good-looking, and very smug. She was a well-endowed woman that apparently had just the right assets to gain Dick's approval. We shall call her Bimbo. Bimbo had a background in business-to-business sales and did not mesh into the family culture we had developed over the years. Her arrogance made it clear that Dick had big plans for her to be promoted quickly through the ranks. It was about that same time when we also heard of an incident involving Dick during his 2 weeks of training at corporate headquarters. Dick allegedly fell asleep while watching the Super Bowl and left the bathtub faucet on in his hotel room. It was running long enough to overflow the tub and flooded 2 rooms below his, one of which was the hotel's IT room, causing around $20,000 in damages. This knowledge, combined with Dick's apparent drinking habits, told us a lot about how he handled stress. As morale continued to decline, along with our sales revenue, Dick became more and more irritated. We had daily sales meetings, and his desperation began to show. It was clear that the corporation was pressuring Dick to improve sales and that his job was in jeopardy. It was important to note that sales managers had the ability to give team incentives in order to motivate a team when necessary. While Jim had occasionally offered incentives, it was never anything like what Dick offered our sales team at that time. We tried to explain to Dick that it was a slow time of year for sales and that pushing customers too hard often ended up with less than ideal outcomes in the end. Dick was having none of it. He promised that he would take the entire team out to celebrate if we hit our sales quota for the month. His incentive was a riverboat cruise for each salesperson plus 1 guest each if we simply hit our quota for the month. He said that if we had any customers that were on the fence, that we should do whatever we had to in order to close the deal. We all agreed to do just that. For the next week and a half, we called every contact we could and pushed every deal towards a contract until we hit a quota. We never sold anything they didn't actually want, but we simply pushed to get it done sooner. The end result was we barely made our quota for the month. Dick quickly really took pride that he had pulled it off and had made his quota for the month and booked the riverboat cruise as he had promised. He even arranged for a limo ride to and from the cruise. My wife and I, however, decided to drive ourselves. We are not big drinkers and normally wouldn't even go on something such as a riverboat cruise, but there was no way I was gonna miss out on what was about to unfold. You see, what I also heard is that the regional market manager for our area, the person that hired Dick, was also going to be present on the cruise. I also knew that Dick would make sure there was a full bar available on the company dime. I was right. My wife and I agreed in advance to have one drink each and to do a little dancing together, as we rightly deserved. However, what we really came to do was sit and watch. As expected, Dick showed his true colors by drinking up a storm and running up a huge bill for the company. Better yet was that Bimbo and her date celebrated to an extreme. At one point, she and her date were dry humping on the dance floor as we and the regional market manager looked on. She had hopped up, straddling him with her dress up around her hips and panties in full view. We all watched on, some of us in shock, some in amusement. Pervs. At the end of our cruise, my wife and I walked back to our car. Bimbo and her date were passed out half naked and sprawled on a park bench on the dock. Dick was trying to round everyone up to the limo. The following Monday brought the new month and our sales tanked. We had burned through every lead we had the month prior and were left sitting at our desks with no leads. During each sales meeting that followed, Dick became more and more desperate until he finally flipped out in the middle of a meeting. This alarmed one staff member, not me. Dick was called into an HR meeting that resulted in his termination. Bimbo disappeared around the same time. Things at that location continued to take on more of a corporate vibe, so I left that job a few years after that. About 5 years later, I saw Dick living out of his car with 2 small dogs at the local bus station. We locked eyes for a moment, and I just smiled. I really do wish him the best, but I also hope he learns something about humility. You watch this guy freaking destroy his own life. That is brutal. Also, that riverboat thing sounded pretty cool. Alright, this story is called Use the Union Guidelines to Outsmart an HR Woman. When I was a senior in high school, I started working as a cashier at a grocery store. While this was not my first job, it was my first one where I was part of a union and learned about some of the pros and cons of unions. Mostly pros like regular raises, breaks, holiday pay, etc. We had a woman there who was basically our human resources person, and we did not get along from even before I worked there. I will call her Sally. I came in for my interview and Sally was not there and had left for the day. I remember apologizing and saying, "Oh, I must have mixed up the days. Is there any way you can find out which is the correct day for my interview?" But the manager on duty advised me that I was correct as they had checked the calendar in her office and she had it written down, and so he, the front-end supervisor, and the other manager who came in to start his shift all interviewed and hired me instead. I later heard from the group Vine that she was working 2 locations and really wanted to be hired full-time at a larger store, which would have been a promotion for her, but instead she was placed full-time at our location only and didn't get promoted, and that her missing my interview was the final nail in the coffin for her, as this was just one of a long list of mistakes she made. She was always making excuses for why I couldn't be put in to be transferred to another department when they were hiring people for those departments, like bakery or deli, and kept me as a cashier even though it was lower pay. Even so, I came back to work there over my winter break for college. I had gone away to college instead of commuting, and also summer break. Here is where my malicious compliance comes in. Our union states that after a waiting period, I believe it was 3 months, we get holiday pay for working Sundays and holidays. It was time and a half. We are also entitled to a raise every 6 months, and being away at college is not supposed to affect that, since we joined the union before leaving and come back on our breaks and still owe our dues during those times when we are still part of the union but away at school. I got my first paycheck stub for the summer and noticed I did not get my holiday for working that Sunday nor my raise. I spoke with a coworker who advised me to speak with the store manager. He was the one that interviewed me and always looked after his staff, since we were between union reps at the time. He was a born problem solver and told me right away he can fix the payroll error for me and make sure that I got not only the proper wage from now on, but that I would get the back pay for the time I should have gotten the raise but didn't. As far as holiday pay though, that had to be taken care of by Sally since she was in HR, and he suggested we go see if she was free and speak with her. She just spoke to the both of us in a condescending tone about how this was union policy, that I had to start all over again with seniority, and that I had to earn that holiday pay again by being there for 3 months. He pointed out, as I did, that I was getting this holiday before leaving for college and even over the winter break that I had worked, but she just kept saying to me, "It's union policy." My manager calmly tried to negotiate with her and get her to correct, and even stated that other employees had not had to go through this. I finally just raised my hand to silence them both. Okay, so you're saying that I can't get my holiday pay even though I was before I left to go back to college at the end of January due to union policy, correct?
Yes,
She said with a long, dramatic sigh that was meant to say,
like I have been telling you.
I nodded, grinned, and stated, "But union policy also states that I don't have to work holidays or Sundays, and that I can't be penalized for refusing to do so, correct?" My manager grinned at me like he was very proud of me, as he saw exactly where this is going.
Well, yes, that is true.
Sally said, looking a bit nervous. Okay, well then, here is the compromise. Since union policy states that I can't get the holiday pay for working Sundays and holidays for the rest of the summer, I will not work any Sundays or holidays, and per union policy, I am allowed to do this, I said with a shrug. She immediately started laying on the charm about how I am such a great worker and that they really need me to be there to help out with Sundays and holidays. But I pointed out that they had plenty of other employees who were getting the holiday pay that they count on, and I would be glad to return to working holidays and Sundays once I got my holiday for doing so. My manager commented that he and I needed to change the schedule and casually mentioned how this was going to be hard as he now had to take me off for next Sunday and Monday, as that Monday was Memorial Day and it was a Thursday, but that the store would just have to make it work if they couldn't find anyone willing to come in. Once she had left for the day, he called me upstairs to his office to help with the schedule since I had to work so many days each week. I walked in to find him and another manager there grinning ear to ear, telling me how proud they were of me for how I handled that situation. On Memorial Day and the 4th of July, I got a call asking if I could come in because they had other people call out sick who were scheduled. I just calmly explained that I was no longer working Sundays or holidays and that Sally could explain why. Before the end of the summer, she found a new position and quit, and the new HR person was much nicer. One of the first things she did was make sure I and a few other college students who had similar issues with the holiday got our holiday pay reinstated, and when I requested about a transfer to another department, she gladly asked around and had me put in the health and beauty AIDS department that same week. Update. Wow, now over 4,000 likes and all kinds of awards. Thanks. You know what, man? Baller. I love it. Freaking stick it to that HR crony. That corporate crony, I should say. But yeah, I'm happy how this turned out. Alright, this story's called Try Telling a Queer Scientist That He Has No Choice. My husband, Chad, is naturally a better decorator than many professional designers that have their own shows. Years ago, when he lived in an apartment complex, the rental office staff became aware of how beautiful he decorated his apartment. It really was award-winning, literally. Anyway, the apartment manager notified Chad that his apartment was to be the model going forward. Chad was not happy with this development. Stranger moving through his personal areas, going through his things, possibly stealing things? Unacceptable. The apartment manager was quick to mention that this was a part of Chad's lease. Suddenly, an idea occurred to Chad. Are you allowed to move or cover up anything in my apartment? No sir, we are not allowed to touch, move, rearrange, or cover up anything. Thank you. Chad put up every piece of male erotica he possessed, and he even bought some more. Posters, figurines, serious art, even a pile of magazines fanned out on the coffee table, like some kind of doctor's office. this. Chad called the rental office and warned them against bringing anyone into his apartment that was a child or squeamish about such subject matter. The rental office immediately sent over one of their maintenance men to confirm. Check and mate. I love it. That's so uncomfortable though. The fact that is that a thing? Do people do apartment managers or whatever is like just a random person's apartment? Like they do the tours in a random person's apartment like they're selling a house? Because that makes me uncomfortable. And I'm sure he made them uncomfortable. Am I right, fellas? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.